Here's a rewritten, more engaging version in simple, emotional, conversational language, around 200 words. I couldn't believe my luck when Kwame invited me to his family's dinner in Lamaya City. I had heard so much about them, how powerful and wealthy they were, but seeing it all in person was overwhelming. The moment I stepped into the grand hall, my eyes widened. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting a golden glow on the polished marble floors. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfumes and rich food. Every seat was filled with his relatives, cousins, uncles, aunts, all dressed in suits and elegant dresses that shimmered under the light. I felt like a small fish in a huge, luxurious pond. Kwame walked beside me, proud and smiling, introducing me to everyone with a warmth I appreciated, but I couldn't shake the nervous flutter in my chest. Every whispered laugh, every sideways glance, made me painfully aware that I didn't belong in this world of polished silverware and golden accents. My dress was simple, my shoes modest, but I tried to lift my chin high, reminding myself that I had earned my place there just by being with him. Tonight I wanted nothing more than to belong, even if just for a few hours. If you want, I can continue and rewrite the next outline, The Cold Stairs, in the same style so the story keeps building emotionally. Do you want me to do that next? Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of The Cold Stairs, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. As soon as I sat down at the long, polished dining table, I felt it, the weight of 100 eyes staring right through me. Every movement I made, every small gesture, seemed to draw more attention. I could hear faint whispers passing from one side of the table to the other, barely quiet enough for me to catch, yet loud enough to sting. They were judging me, my simple dress, my modest shoes, the way I held my fork, even the careful way I smiled. I tried to focus on Kwame, who sat beside me, but even his warm hand on mine couldn't fully shield me from the icy atmosphere that had settled over the room. I could sense the subtle snickers when I reached for my water glass, the slight tilt of heads as if comparing me to the women in their world, women who wore silk and diamonds like second skin. Each laugh, each sideways glance made my stomach knot tighter. I felt exposed, fragile, like I had stepped into a world where I didn't belong, and every whisper reminded me of it. I kept my eyes forward, trying to appear calm, to match their poise and elegance, but inside I was trembling. My heart pounded as I imagined what they were saying. Probably stories about how I must be after Kwame's wealth, how I couldn't possibly fit into their shiny, perfect lives. I reminded myself to breathe, to hold my chin high. I wasn't just a girl sitting at a table of strangers. I was someone with my own worth, someone who had worked hard for everything she had. Still, the cold stares were suffocating. Every glance felt like a quiet accusation, a judgment I couldn't escape. I wished I could disappear, fade into the gold-patterned walls or slip quietly under the long velvet curtains. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark refused to be extinguished. I clenched my hands in my lap and promised myself that no matter what they thought or said, I would not let them bray. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the cruel accusation, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Halfway through the dinner, I thought maybe the worst of it was over, that perhaps some of the stares had softened, that I could at least enjoy a few bites of food without feeling like I was under a microscope. But then Kwame spoke, and the words hit me like a thunderclap. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice louder than I expected, echoing through the glittering hall. "She's only here for my money. She's just a gold digger." Time seemed to freeze. The sound of silverware dropping softly onto plates, the clinking of glasses, everything faded into the background. My stomach lurched and I felt my face burn. The table erupted with laughter, cruel, sharp, and mocking. I could see the satisfaction in their eyes, the way some leaned back, smug smiles curling on their lips, as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. Kwame looked at me, expecting a reaction. I wanted to vanish, to sink through the floor, but I couldn't. My hands trembled on my lap. I swallowed hard, trying to force my voice steady. I wanted to defend myself, to scream, to tell him and everyone else that I was more than their shallow assumptions, but the words stuck in my throat. I saw my dream slipping away, the chance to be accepted, to feel a part of something bigger than my own small world. But even as my heart shattered, a quiet, stubborn voice inside me refused to crumble entirely. I straightened in my chair, lifted my chin, and reminded myself that their laughter didn't define me. Their words didn't have the power to diminish the life I had built for myself. The rest of the meal became a blur. Every bite tasted like ash. Every laugh and whisper felt like a knife twisting deeper. I felt the humiliation settle over me, heavy and suffocating. And yet, somewhere in the pit of my chest, beneath the shock and shame, a spark began to grow, a spark that would. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of my silent pain, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. I froze, my body caught between shock and disbelief. My hand shook as I gripped my glass of water, the cool surface doing nothing to calm the heat rising in my chest. For a moment, I wanted nothing more than to disappear, to vanish into the marble floor beneath me or slip behind the heavy curtains at the edge of the dining hall. Every eye was on me, every whisper and glance a reminder that I was the target of their cruel amusement. Tears threatened to spill, but I forced them back. If I let them see me cry, they would have won. Their laughter would have been my defeat, a permanent stain on my dignity. So I swallowed hard, pressed my lips together, and lifted my chin, forcing a calm, polite smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. My heart ached heavy and raw, as I tried to focus on breathing, on pretending that the words didn't hurt as much as they did. Inside, a storm raged. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and small. Kwame, the person I trusted, had thrown me to the wolves in front of everyone I had been trying so hard to impress. The room felt colder now, the air thick with judgment and ridicule. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the words were swallowed by the sharp sting of shame. And yet, beneath the hurt, a quiet voice whispered that I was stronger than this. I reminded myself of every challenge I had faced in life, every moment I had refused to let others define my worth. I wasn't just a girl in a simple dress at a luxurious dinner. I was someone who deserved respect, someone who would not allow cruelty to strip her of her pride. So I stayed silent. I let them believe they had won this round. I let my calm mask hide the fire that was growing inside me. Every tremble, every forced smile became fuel. I would not let this night break me. One day, they would see that the girl they humiliated had more courage, more strength. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the check arrives in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The last dish was cleared, leaving behind the lingering aroma of roasted meat, sweet sauces, and freshly baked bread. Just as I was about to breathe a quiet sigh of relief, the waiter returned, placing a thick leather-bound check folder in the center of the table. The sheer size of it made everyone pause, their eyes instinctively turning to Kwame. They expected him to reach for it immediately, to take charge as the man of the house. A few whispered comments floated across the table, soft, judgmental, curious, but their meaning was clear. The assumption was that I would sit back and let him pay. I watched him, my pulse steady despite the storm inside. Kwame's hand hovered over the folder, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and defiance well up in me. Tonight, I wouldn't be the girl who sat quietly, shrinking under their judgment. Tonight, I would reclaim my dignity piece by piece. Calmly, I reached into my purse and pulled out my card. The movement was deliberate, composed, almost serene, as if I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times. I placed it on top of the check, sliding it gently toward the waiter. Silence fell like a heavy curtain over the table. The whispers stopped mid-sentence. Eyes widened. Even Kwame froze, caught off guard by my audacity. I could see it then. The shock in their faces, the disbelief in their eyes. The girl they had judged as simple, as poor, as someone unworthy of their world, was taking charge. I wasn't here to be a passive accessory to their power or wealth. I was here to show that respect, dignity, and courage mattered far more than social status or fancy attire. The waiter nodded politely, taking the card with a quiet smile, and I leaned back in my chair, feeling the first real wave of empowerment wash over me. For a fleeting moment, the room was mine, not because of arrogance. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the shock in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The moment my card left my hand, the atmosphere at the table shifted. A heavy, almost tangible silence fell over the room. Whispers froze on people's lips. Forks hovered mid-air, and a few people glanced at each other, eyes wide with disbelief. Even Kwame's mother, who had the sharpest gaze and the proudest air, let out a small gasp, her hand covering her mouth as if to stop herself from speaking. I felt their stares like electricity buzzing across my skin. Every glance, every wide-eyed look screamed the same thought. The girl they had mocked as poor, the one they had judged for her simple dress and quiet manners, was paying for the entire dinner herself. The same dinner that was lavish enough to make anyone's head spin, with courses that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and wine that glimmered like liquid gold in crystal glasses. Kwame's jaw tightened, and I could see his surprise, the sudden realization that he had underestimated me. Some of the cousins leaned back in their chairs, their smug expressions faltering, replaced by confusion and a hint of respect, or maybe it was shock at how someone so unassuming could quietly take control. I remained calm, letting the silence stretch, letting them sit with the truth they hadn't expected. I wasn't trying to prove anything, at least not to them, but I did want them to understand something important. I could be dignified. I could be strong. I could choose my own terms in a room where they thought they held all the power. The waiter returned to collect the card, and I leaned back slightly in my chair, meeting a few of their eyes with a quiet, unwavering confidence. The message was clear. I might look like the simplest person in the room, but I was no one's charity case. Tonight I wasn't just paying for a dinner. I was reclaiming my dignity, showing that true strength often comes Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of my walk of dignity, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. I pushed back my chair slowly, letting the scrape of wood against marble announce my movement without hesitation. I stood up, feeling every eye on me, some filled with disbelief, others with curiosity and maybe a hint of envy. I adjusted my shawl over my shoulders, smoothing it with deliberate calm, a small act that felt like armor against the weight of their judgment. I looked around the table, meeting Kwame's eyes for a brief moment. His face was a mixture of shock and embarrassment, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came out. I didn't wait for him. I didn't wait for anyone. Instead, I spoke clearly, letting my voice carry across the glittering room. A gold digger doesn't pay. She invests in her dignity. The words lingered in the air, sharp and calm, leaving a silence that spoke louder than any argument or defense could. With that, I turned toward the exit. Each step was deliberate, measured, a rhythm that matched the quiet fury and strength that had been building inside me all night. I could feel the stares burning into my back, the whispers resuming in low tones, but I walked as if nothing could shake me. Every click of my heels against the polished floor was a statement. I was not broken, I was not ashamed, and I was not someone to be belittled. As I approached the door, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and relief. This was my moment, the first step in taking back control of the night, my story and my pride. The luxurious hall, the glittering chandeliers, even the smug faces around the table faded into the background. For the first time that evening, I wasn't a girl being judged. I was a woman reclaiming her worth. And though I left the room, I knew my presence would linger. The image of me walking away with calm dignity, refusing to let humiliation define me, would stay in their minds far longer than the. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the unexpected company, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Just as I reached the heavy wooden door, my hand on the handle, I felt a presence behind me. I froze for a moment, unsure if I should turn or keep walking. Slowly, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him, Mr. Njoro. He was tall, composed, and radiated an authority that filled the room even without words. The CEO of Lamaya Holdings and a distant uncle in Kwame's family had been watching everything silently from his seat, his eyes calm but sharp, absorbing every glance, every whisper, every small act of courage I had shown. I felt a shiver run down my spine, not of fear but of sudden awareness. This was someone powerful, someone whose opinion mattered far beyond this room. I instinctively straightened my posture, smoothing my dress and adjusting my shawl, trying to appear calm even as my heart pounded. His gaze wasn't judging or mocking. It was different, measured, observant, and somehow respectful. "You handled yourself very well," he said quietly, his voice deep and steady, almost carrying over the soft hum of the dining hall behind us. "I've been watching, and I must say not many people could have done what you just did." I blinked, surprised. My first instinct was disbelief. Was this real? Or was it just another twist in an already shocking evening? But the seriousness in his eyes told me he meant every word. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of pride, a spark that reminded me that strength isn't measured by wealth or appearances, but by courage, dignity, and composure under pressure. He paused, letting the words settle. You didn't react with anger, you didn't beg for approval. You remained true to yourself. That takes more power than most people ever discover. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say, feeling both honored and a little nervous. My mind raced with thoughts, wondering why he had approached me. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the CEO's words, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Outside the grand dining hall, the warm glow of the chandeliers fading behind us, Mr. Njoro finally spoke again. He stopped a few steps away from the door, his tall frame casting a long shadow on the marble floor. His expression was calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made me feel like he could see straight through to my very core. I admire your strength, he said, his voice steady and sincere. Tonight you showed something rare. You showed class where others only showed cruelty. His words made my heart skip. I had spent the whole evening pretending to be calm, forcing my composure in a room full of whispers, judgment, and mockery. And here was someone powerful, someone who had witnessed everything, telling me that he noticed, not just the pain I endured, but the way I carried myself through it. You handled yourself with dignity, he continued. You didn't fight back with anger or bitterness. You didn't beg for approval or try to justify yourself. You simply stayed true to who you are. That's more than most people ever manage. I could feel warmth creeping into my chest, a mix of relief and cautious pride. For the first time tonight, it felt like someone actually saw me. Not the whispers, the dress, or the assumptions, but me. My courage, my self-respect, my refusal to be broken. A woman like you deserves more than insult, he said, his gaze unwavering. You deserve respect. You deserve people who recognize your worth. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. The tension of the evening, the humiliation, the whispers, all of it had been building like a storm inside me, and now, hearing his words, it felt like the first gentle breeze of calm after a long, cold rain. In that moment, outside the doors of judgment and ridicule, I realized that tonight was no longer just about humili. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the car ride in simple conversational English, around 350 words. He gestured toward the sleek black car waiting just outside the entrance. For a moment I hesitated, unsure if I should accept. The night had already been a whirlwind: humiliation, judgment, shock. But something about his calm presence and steady gaze gave me courage. I nodded, and he opened the door for me with a polite, practiced motion that felt almost ceremonial. Sliding into the leather seat, I felt the quiet power of the car beneath me, the smooth hum of the engine as it purred to life. As we drove through the glowing streets of Lumaya, the city lights reflecting off the glossy buildings, Mr. Njoro began to speak. At first I listened in silence, still shaken, my mind replaying every moment of the evening, the whispers, the cruel laughter, Kwame's words. But slowly, his voice drew me out of the fog of embarrassment. He spoke of business and leadership, about the importance of character and integrity, about how true strength is measured not by wealth or privilege, but by courage, dignity, and the way one handles adversity. I couldn't help but glance at him from the corner of my eye. His words were calm, deliberate, and carried a weight that made me realize this conversation was more than small talk. He wasn't just speaking to me as a stranger or a distant relative. He was speaking to me as someone who had witnessed my strength, someone who saw potential and character in a way that no one else that evening had. The hum of the tires on the road matched the rhythm of my racing heart. A strange mix of emotions swirled inside me: relief, pride, disbelief, and a growing sense of possibility. I realized that tonight was no longer just about humiliation. It had become something much bigger. A moment of recognition, a turning point, an unexpected opportunity that could change the course of my life. By the time the car slowed near my street, Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the invitation in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The car slowed to a stop in front of my modest apartment building, the city lights flickering gently across the windows. I was still catching my breath from the whirlwind of the evening, from the shock, the humiliation, and the unexpected conversation with Mr. Njoro. My hands were slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the strange mix of excitement and disbelief that pulsed through me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek card, handing it to me with a quiet but firm gesture. I took it, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the subtle texture of the embossed letters beneath my fingertips. My eyes met his, and I could see a seriousness there that made my heart skip. "Come to my office tomorrow," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. "I believe you have the mind and the courage I need in my company." For a moment I just stared at him, unable to speak. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing against the memories of the evening. The cruel laughter, Kwame's betrayal, the stares that had made me feel so small. And now, in one quiet sentence, those same events seemed to shift, transforming into something entirely different. Shame had turned into recognition. Humiliation had turned into opportunity. I felt a surge of hope, mingled with disbelief. Could this really be happening? Could someone so powerful, someone I had only observed from afar, actually see my worth in a way that no one else had that night? My chest swelled with a mixture of pride and anticipation. I nodded, managing to whisper a small, grateful thank you. He gave a subtle, approving smile and gestured for me to step out of the car. As I closed the door behind me, the cool night air hit my face, and I felt as if the city itself had shifted. Everything that had happened, the judgment, the whispers, the pain, it had all led to this. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of the family's gossip, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Back at the dinner table, the air had shifted. The once confident chatter and laughter were replaced by restless murmurs and awkward glances. Everyone seemed uneasy, glancing at one another, unsure how to break the silence that had settled over the room like a heavy fog. The moment I had walked out, paying the bill with calm dignity, had left a mark deeper than any words could convey, and now whispers began to spread. She left with the CEO," someone murmured, almost like the words were too big to fully pronounce. Heads nodded in disbelief, eyes widening as they pieced together what had just happened. The whispers grew louder, carrying confusion, envy, and a touch of fear. Everyone was trying to understand how the girl they had judged and mocked, the one they assumed was just after money, could suddenly command the attention of someone so powerful. Kwame shifted in his seat, his usual confidence cracking. I could imagine the thoughts running through his mind, how quickly the night had turned against him, how he had miscalculated not just my character, but the weight of his own actions. His face betrayed panic, the subtle signs of shame flashing through his eyes as he realized that tonight, he hadn't just lost face. He had lost control. He had let cruelty guide him, and in doing so he had allowed someone else, someone he had underestimated, to seize the moment, to shine where he had faltered. The family's gossip was relentless now. Whispers carried across the table, speculations about who I really was, why the CEO had noticed me, what my future might hold. And even though I wasn't there to hear it, I knew it was happening, felt it in the energy I had left behind. Every sideways glance and murmured comment became a reminder that judgment could be turned on its head, that assumptions could crumble, and that true strength qui. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of The New Beginning, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The next morning I stepped into the towering glass building of Lamaya Holdings, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. The sleek lobby gleamed with polished floors and modern art, a world I had only glimpsed from the outside, a world that now seemed suddenly within reach. I clutched the card Mr. Njoro had given me the night before, a tangible reminder that everything had changed in just a few hours. He greeted me with the same calm confidence I had noticed before, his presence immediately grounding me. "Follow me," he said, leading me through wide corridors to a large conference room where several people were seated. These were the board members, powerful and respected figures whose eyes turned toward me as we entered. I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but unlike last night, this was not judgment meant to belittle me. It was assessment, respect, and curiosity. Mr. Njoro cleared his throat and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of woman who knows her worth," he said, his voice steady, carrying authority. "She handled herself with dignity and courage in a situation that would have humbled most people. She will be joining us." The words settled over me like a warm embrace. For a moment I felt stunned, almost speechless, as the board members began to clap. Not politely or perfunctorily, but genuinely, as if acknowledging something rare and extraordinary. Applause filled the room, and I realized I was no longer the girl judged for a simple dress or quiet manners. I was someone recognized for strength, character, and intelligence. As I shook hands with Mr. Njoro and the board members, I felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. The humiliation of the night before seemed distant now, like a shadow that had been replaced by light. This was a new beginning, an opportunity one had never imagined. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of The Twist of Fate, in simple conversational English, around 350 words. By the next morning, news of what had happened the night before spread through Lamaya City like wildfire. Every whisper, every sideways glance seemed to carry the same astonished question. Did you hear? She left with the so? I could almost hear the disbelief in their voices, the awe and envy mingled together. The same people who had laughed at me, whispered about me, judged me for my simple dress and quiet manners, were now forced to acknowledge that the girl they dismissed had taken a step they could not have imagined. Kwame's calls started coming in almost immediately. My phone buzzed relentlessly, his name flashing across the screen. I stared at it for a moment, feeling a quiet, satisfying calm. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence, deliberate and composed, became louder than any argument I could have made. It spoke more powerfully than any words ever could. It said I was unbothered, untouchable, and far beyond the petty cruelty of the night before. I could imagine his frustration, the way he must have realized that mocking me had backfired spectacularly. Every insult, every whisper, every sideways glance he thought would belittle me had only highlighted my strength and character. He had tried to humiliate me, but fate had a different plan. The tables had turned completely, and this time, I was the one in control of the story. Even the family's whispers changed tone. Where there had once been judgment and mockery, there was now awe, respect, and a subtle undercurrent of fear of underestimating someone again. My presence, my dignity, my courage had left a mark that no one could ignore. As I watched the messages, the comments, the social media buzz, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with proof. Strength and grace under pressure mattered far more than cruelty or. Here's a rewritten, emotional, and detailed version of The Woman Who Rose Above in simple conversational English, around 250 words. Standing in my new office, I let my eyes wander across the city lights glittering like a sea of stars. The view felt endless, full of possibilities I had only dreamed of before. I thought back to that dinner table in Lamaya City, the whispers, the judgment, the cruel words, and the laughter meant to humiliate me. For a moment the memory stung, but then I reminded myself of the strength I had found that night, the calm dignity that had carried me through. I smiled softly, thinking about how far I had come. They had called me a gold digger, trying to diminish me with a word, a label, a false assumption. Yet here I was, not defined by their judgments, but by my courage, my composure, and my ability to rise above cruelty. Every step I had taken since that night had been proof that dignity was far more powerful than ridicule, and that patience, self-respect, and confidence could turn even the harshest humiliation into triumph. The memory of Mr. Njoro's words echoed in my mind. A woman like you deserves respect. And now with him by my side, not just as a mentor, but as someone who recognized my worth, I had found more than opportunity. I had found destiny. In that quiet, powerful moment, I understood that life's greatest victories often come from the hardest trials. I had turned a night of shame into a lifetime of strength. I had risen above, and nothing could ever take that away from me. This completes your full 4,000-word viral, emotional script in detailed conversational style. If you want, I can also compile all 15 chapters into a single, polished script ready to use, with smooth transitions and extra dialogue to make it even more engaging. Do you want me to do that?